All right, hi everybody.
All right, sir. So, let's talk about sleeping with your mother. Private joke.
Well, yeah. It made me the monster I am today.
Very successful monster,
Yes,
let's call it that. All right. So, how has Houston been for you?
Houston's been hot and fine.
Awesome.
Yeah, very happy to be here.
Yeah.
I was here about a year and a half ago. I was out on Galveston Island at a couple of comic book shops.
Yes.
And so I know the area. It's beautiful. It's fantastic, and I love it.
Let's go back to the very beginning, shall we? This time, new audience, new city. Can we talk about your acting journey? What got you involved?
Yes. When I was a little boy, I grew up outside of Chicago.
Yeah.
And I used to risk life and limb in Chicago by sneaking down the hall at midnight on Saturday nights and watching a show called, let's see what it was called anyway. But it was like the midnight horror show. And it was always very funny. I remember watching TV, black and white, hoping my parents didn't get up and come down and bust me. And it was called, actually, I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, I do remember one moment where there was a fake laboratory, and there was a slab, with all these bubbling cauldrons and things, and there was a sheet over something, and this voice went, "Behold, Frankenstein," and he pulled back the sheet, and there was like a mug of beer with a hot dog in it, so it was like Frankenstein. And that was very funny. That was my first horror humor from an early age. And I used to get up on the kitchen sink, and there was a mirror, actually the bathroom sink, and I'd look into the mirror and I would make a horror face. Like I would pretend I saw something coming from afar, and as it got closer, my eyes would widen, and it got really close, and I'd go, "Ah!" And I'd make these screams, and just kind of practice. My dad was also, he was a Marine, ex-Marine, football player, hunter, not a no-nonsense guy, but he was really big on Halloween. He loved Halloween. So for Halloween, he would take my two brothers and me. I had an older and a younger brother. And we would do crazy things. He would have arranged certain things. We'd go to an old, abandoned barn, and he would have had a friend up there in some kind of scary outfit, scaring us, telling us to go into the barn and, get some straw. We'd go in there, and the characters would jump out at us and everything. So it was actually, I was kind of conditioned to this line of work. So I appreciate that, Dad. Thank you. One night, actually, we went to the local cemetery in Barrington, Illinois, and Dad, there was just a bunch of little boys, and Dad gave us, pieces of white paper and charcoal, and told us to do grave rubbings. So we ought to go out and just kind of rub, put the paper on the gravestone, rub, and put the names. And Dad, unbeknownst to us, Dad had already arranged with the Barrington police to show up at the graveyard. And so we were, little boys, 10, 11 years old, 12, 13 maybe, at the oldest. And all of a sudden, this black and white rolls in, and then suddenly it just erupts. It turns on the siren and all the red lights, and we're terrified. There was one kid named Andy Shanehofen, who was in my brother's class in grade school. And he was so frightened, he ran to the edge of the graveyard, hopped the wall, and then ran, I think it was about 2 miles to his house. He ran all the way home because he was so afraid. So that was kind of my conditioning. I know that doesn't really say much about my current situation, but those are the roots.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously you are a horror fan yourself, and horror has evolved so much over the last, 100 years. What makes you excited about horror today and its evolutions?
Well, I'm glad that actually with Terrifier and Terrifier 2, I'm glad that there is a return to practical effects. Not a big CGI guy. I mean, CGI is cool if it works as kind of like subtly. Like if there's 1,000 zombies, I get that it's cheaper to do like CGI zombies than hire 1,000 people and put them in makeup and feed them. But I really like the practical effects, and I grew up, I worked on Texas Chainsaw 2 with Tom Savini, King of Splatter, and so I did a lot of cool stuff. I did the Rob Zombie movies with Wayne Toth. He's the special effects makeup guy, and so I've worked with some really cool, with Greg Canham. So that I really like. I mean, it gets a little tough when you have to sit in a chair for 5 hours. And get all kinds of makeup on, but it's worth it because by the time you actually get on set and get ready to roll, you're totally ready to attack.
It's also worth it in the long run. It ages very well, as opposed to CGI does not age well.
No.
And I mean, you did a movie recently, which I'm not going to call them out. Good movie, but I'm like, oh, CGI. Yeah. There's a lot of CGI.
Yeah, which one was that, Natty? No?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I loved it except for the whole, CGI...
Spirit coming out.
What did I call it? We covered it on our podcast. It'll come out in a couple of weeks. I called it Evacuation of Natty.
Yes.
She evacuates from Bill.
I know. Well, they couldn't really, do that.
No.
I would have had to swallow a lot of smoke or something.
But it also,
which Evan has to do.
It also was very reminiscent of not The Conjuring, Haunting in Connecticut. There was a really similar scene in that, and that was also CGI, and it looked the same. CGI always looks the same, and that movie's 20 years old.
Yeah,
It's just the way it is.
Yeah, they haven't really improved.
No, that's my.
But I can't talk about that because I'm a Screen Actors Guild member and I'm on strike, so I can't really talk about anything that I've done recently.
Wasn't going to mention it, the name, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it's good you didn't mention Natty Knox because I couldn't really do that.
Yeah, we can't talk about Natty Knox.
Can't talk about any of the things that I've been doing. Like I cannot talk about
or anything you've ever done.
Hayride to Hell. I can't talk about I'm Scared to Death, which I did with Lynn Shay, because that's I can't talk about.
Nope.
There
we go. There we go.
Here I am.
There's the camera.
Shag,
They're going after Bill Moseley now.
Yeah.
No.
Actually, I have been picking.
I know. That's why I wanted to be respectful of that.
Yes, thank you.
For you.
Yep.
Do we have any questions right now? If not, I can continue. Yes, sir.
Oh, what was your hometown? You said in Chicago. You grew up in Chicago?
Yes.
What part of?
A town called Barrington.
Really?
Yeah.
It's my hometown.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
My first theatrical experience was at the Catwalk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is movie theater at this point.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's what I meant.
Oh,
Cinematic experience.
Right.
Real specific.
Gotcha. What year were you in Barrington?
I was there from 1954 till pretty much, I think my mom moved to Lake Barrington Shores, so pretty much the entire second half of the 1900s.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like working with Dennis Hopper?
That's a good question. I didn't really have a lot going on with Dennis. Dennis was in, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And actually, didn't really interact with Dennis too much. I do remember one day we were at the Brook Hollow Motor Inn outside of Austin, and I was getting ready for another, 18-hour day, 19-hour day. And I remember going into the breakfast room at the Brook Hollow to grab a roll or something before I jumped in the van. And Dennis was in there also, and he was apparently getting ready to put his golf bags in the back of his rental car to go off to Willie Nelson's Country Club and play golf. So Dennis was doing okay. But I didn't really, the only scenes I had with Dennis was at the very end, when he invades out there. Didn't really have a lot of interaction with him. That's more of a Caroline Williams question, I think she probably did.
You know, we have the two Bills of TCM here.
Right.
You and Bill Johnson.
Yeah.
Any fun memories, stories of working, hanging out with Johnson?
Yeah, I love Bill Johnson.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember everybody was getting sick on Chainsaw 2. And there were a number of factors. One is a lot of the set was in Austin at the old newspaper building, the Austin Statesman, which had moved, but it left its old printing building downtown Austin. And we did a lot of, I think the Chainsaw Lair was in there. But the problem with the Austin Statesman building was that it had great old wooden beams supporting the ceiling, and there was about 1.5 inches thick of printer's ink coating all these beams. And so a lot of people were getting, and there was a lot of dust, so people were getting respiratory illness and walking pneumonia. Also, in a lot of the underground scenes where Stretch is running, getting chased by Leatherface, there's, they go past these dioramas of like skeletons and, beach chairs and all these weird little scenarios with, human skeletons. Well, it turns out that it was cheaper to get real skeletons than fake skeletons back then. And I don't know where they got them, somewhere in the, I don't know if it was, I don't know what country, India or Indonesia, some country that was literally selling, like 100 pounds of skeletons for like $50, I don't know. And it didn't matter, it was just like, they were real human skeletons. And so I think that probably added to the general, disease factor. And also, actually, there were some theories that there was maybe some kind of a curse because we had used real human skeletons. I was very nice to the skeletons, so I so far avoided the curse.
There's always a curse. There's always a curse.
There's always a curse. Anyway, so what was the question again?
Working with Bill Johnson.
Oh yes, Bill Johnson. Yeah, so Billy Bob, thank you very much. Billy Bob would come. He was kind of a little holistic, I guess, and he came. I remember he would come to set with these balls that were about the size of golf balls. And what they were soft. They were dark green. They were pungent, and there was some kind of like herbal ball from I don't know where the hell it was from. And he said, eat this ball, and you will, you will be okay. And so I did. I actually ate the balls, and, so to speak, and I was okay. I never got sick. Other people did, but not me. And I was working a lot. I worked it was not uncommon to work 20-hour days because I was getting paid minimum wage. So the company that the production company Canon Films didn't really have to pay that much, even if they forced my call. And with a forced call is when you have worked so many hours, and then you as a union actor you get a 12-hour turnaround. So that means once they let you off at the hotel, they can't pick you up until 12 hours later minimum. Unless, and if they do something called a forced call, which means they have to pay you a full day's wage to force your call, pick you up earlier than 12 hours. And so for me, they were forcing my call left and right, but because I had such a small salary, it didn't really bother them. So I was working, 20-hour days.
Making overtime.
Yeah, I guess. But I loved working with Billy Johnson. I loved working with Jim Sedow, who played the cook in both Chainsaw 1 and 2. And I especially loved working with Toby Hooper. I mean, that was pretty amazing.
It's been a long time since I've seen this movie, but didn't you get to play the Sea-Down character for a second? Or who did you play in?
No, I did in Texas Chainsaw 3D.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, when they're going back in time to the family again, and
Yes.
you got to play.
Jim Seadow, yes,
Yeah.
and because I had
Full
just
circle.
I had finished working on Repo, the genetic opera, and one of the producers was a man named Carl Mazzacone, and Carl was the producer of the Chainsaw. It started out as Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D, and then they decided let's forget about the 3D. So then it was just Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Then apparently they tested it with focus groups, and people were uncomfortable with the word massacre.
Mm-hmm.
So then it became Texas Chainsaw. I don't even know what the hell the final title was. But it was funny because Carl Mazzacone approached me and said, "Hey, we're doing this Texas Chainsaw movie, and we'd love to have you play the cook." And I was like, "Well, why would you have me play the cook?" It's kind of like asking, Curly to come back and play Moe for the Three Stooges. So I was told that actually they didn't have the rights to Chop Top because Chop Top Chainsaw 2 was owned by a different company than the original Chainsaw. So they said, okay, well we can't use Chop Top. We don't have the rights to Chop Top. So you can play the cook. And then I said, okay, well, geez, I'll try. And because I love Jim, I loved his wife, Ruth. They lived in Dallas. And anyway, so I said, yeah, sure, okay, I'll do it. And he goes, yes, and so we want you to wear a fat suit. And I said, a fat suit? I said Jim was a gaunt man. He was not fat. He said, no, just wear you're going to wear a fat suit. And I have learned, they've already, signed me to do this, and, there was some money involved, like a salary. And so I learned how to just, make one protest and then shut the fuck up. Sometimes that's the best thing to do. And so I said, okay, so I got this fat suit, which was strange. I learned how to do, Jim's body movements were very quirky, and so I had to learn how to do that. And I learned that the way to do Jim is to lead with your pelvis. So I will demonstrate.
A saunter.
So most of us, kind of walk like this. Jim kind of, he's like this. Hey, look what your brother did to the door! He's always kind of leading with his pelvis. So I was doing that. That was good. And then Carl said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to open with a shot from the original movie. And we want what we're going to do is, because we're using the original shot, we need to replace Jim with you with like some kind of a CGI, superimpose. So we're going to, because obviously if they have Jim and then, cut to you, it's not going to look right. So I didn't really like the idea of that. And I mentioned it to my wife. She said, shut the fuck up. Just do it. Because it's, somehow I had a feeling that I was going to replace Jim, in everything he'd ever done. It didn't
Jim,
occur to
I
me.
don't think would have been mad at you carrying on his legacy.
No. So
You didn't take the job from him. He
I
is
did not
done.
take the job. And but anyway, so I had to learn how to, if you look at the opening of that movie, I'm in there kind of, and I had to match all of his body movements, and that was completely weird.
It was super impressive.
Yes.
I really liked it.
Well, thank you very much. And it just that was a weird job, but it seemed to work out okay.
I really enjoyed the set because it looked so much like the original. It was just stunning. I'm like, whoa, they did a good job on that.
Yes, and it was on a military preserve. I think probably a bombing range.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they didn't, bomb the day I was working. But it was pretty wild. It was actually a really incredible recreation of the original Chainsaw House.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I remember at one point I was lying down on the floor, covered with blood and chicken feathers. And I was at the bottom of the stairs, and rather than get up, and it was so fucking hot and humid, and of course they gave me this fat suit, which was
I was going to say that fat suit in the heat.
Well, it's 2 t-shirts with cotton wadding between them. So I had this, the fat suit, and because it was so hot, it was Louisiana actually, it was Bossier City, and because it was so hot, I sweated a lot. And of course, then the cotton absorbed all my sweat.
Oh.
So it's kind of like wearing a Kevlar vest. And I'm lying there, with this fat suit, and I'm covered with blood and chicken feathers, and I'm lying at the bottom of the stairs. People are walking over me, dragging cables, or getting ready for next shot, or whatever, with me in it, but I didn't want to move. And I was just lying down there, and I was just looking up the stairs, of the chainsaw house. And I just had this, I had a moment of just like, wow, God, I'm here. It was an amazing connection, gratitude. It was like, wonder, because Chainsaw, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre really changed my life when I saw it.
It changed the face of horror as well.
It really did. It was an amazing experience. And one that, freaked me out so much, and I always, give the credit to Ed Neal, the hitchhiker, because he freaked me out. I went to college, I was a smart guy. And I had a college, in college I had a film series called Things That Go Bump in the Night, and I showed horror movies, Tuesday night at midnight on campus. So for years, and so I was always a horror fan, but I went to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I saw it in Boston. And I was on the tail end of a double bill with Enter the Dragon. And I'd never seen a Bruce Lee movie before. And I'm in the combat zone in Boston. I'm watching this movie Sunday afternoon. Bruce Lee, it was a funny, raucous crowd. Everybody's going, kick his ass, Bruce, yelling at the screen. And I'm like, yeah, wow, this is great. And then comes Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And really from the opening moments of like, and you'd see this like slow strobe of a melted corpse. It was like, what the hell is this? It just sucked the air, it sucked the enthusiasm right out of the theater. And it just was like scary. It was like, wow. And Ed Neal's performance as the hitchhiker was so mind-blowing. I had never seen a monster that would scare you by hurting himself. When he's in the back of the van and he's like cutting himself with his straight razor, it's like, oh, wow. They're all freaking out, like, get him out of the car, And he's like running along, and kicking the side of the car, and he's got a possum in his bag. It was like, wow. That freaked me out. And to the point where I ended up I was so freaked out by it. It made, I come from rural Illinois, Barrington, it's kind of country. Yeah. And so it just, from everything that I had, my vision of rural America was very bucolic, like, wow, hey, night crawlers for sale, and, little gas station, barbecue, all right. And after Chainsaw, it was like, whoa, man, who are they cooking, That's where that went. And so I figured that the only way to get over this deep fear of Texas Chainsaw Massacre was to see it a bunch of times, and this was even pre VHS. So in order to get over it, I wanted to see it a bunch of times. But the only way to do that was to find out where it was playing and see it in the theaters. And then I ended up seeing it a bunch of times, but it just made it worse. And then finally, in the summer of '84. I was working on a ranch in Wyoming, and I was working with a kid, like a 16-year-old kid, whose parents had sent him to the ranch to kind of get him out of their hair for the summer. And he was a little sugar freak, and he loved the bug juice, and he loved the fudge sickles and the fucking frosted flakes, and he'd eat all this sugar, and then he'd go, then he'd come out and work under the hot summer sun in Wyoming, and he would go nuts. And he would go, what I called them sugar deliriums. And all of a sudden this hot sun baking down, the sugar's cooking his brain, and he's going like, hey, Captain Crunch, and he's singing top 40 songs, he's doing cartoon voices, he's doing, ads and shit. And I would usually just turn a deaf ear to the guy. I'm just digging a hole for the irrigation or whatever the heck we were doing. And one day, we're out there working and he's doing his crazy thing. He's going, oh, Captain Crunch. And all of a sudden he goes, Texas Chainsaw Manicure. And then go, Captain Crunch, and I was like, what? And I heard that, and wow, it was like a bolt of heavenly lightning. And I went back to the bunkhouse, and I got out my notebook, and I wrote out like a 5-minute scenario of a woman goes to the beauty parlor, gets her hair done, sits under the dryer. The beautician comes out and goes, what'll it be? Oh, I think I'll have a manicure. Okay, manicure, to the back of the shop. Of course, it's got a silver door that slides like, the original chainsaw. And this silver door slides open and out comes Leatherface. Full Leatherface, butcher smock, bloody, crazy, big chainsaw. And, here's this poor woman. She's trapped under the dryer. It's like, oh. And he comes over and starts just sawing her hands. And she's like, ah! He's like, arr! And then she passes out. And then she, the beautician wakes her up. Hey, wake up. She goes, oh. She's got a fabulous manicure. And so that was, I did that really to kind of get over my fear of the Chainsaw Massacre. Well, a friend of mine who happened to be in Hollywood at the time was able to get a copy of the Texas Chainsaw Manicure, all 5 minutes of it. Oh, and then the woman comes out to the, she emerges from the beauty parlor, and there's her husband in the pickup truck, played by me, with Ed Neal's wine mark on his cheek, and the hitchhiker. She goes, look, honey, I got the best manicure ever. And I go, hey, that's great, honey. We should celebrate with some head cheese. And I had gone to the local supermarket and got some head cheese, and it doesn't really look that dramatic, but if you know what's in it, man, it's funky. And so I was like, hey, head cheese, and I even licked it in one take, which was not a good idea. So my friend, gave this to Toby Hooper, and he also gave me Toby's home number and said, why don't you give him a call in, a week, 10 days, just say hi. And I was like, wow, okay. So, a week, 10 days went by, and I called up the number, and I found out later it was a real miracle because actually Toby answered the phone himself. He usually never answered the phone, apparently. And this was his home, and he goes, hello? I go, yes, hi, Toby, it's me, Bill Moseley. And he goes, who? I go, yeah, I did the manicure. And he goes, hey, Bill, I love the manicure. I went, oh, great, man. He said, now, who played the hitchhiker character? And I said, well, that was me. And he said, well, if I ever do a sequel, I'll keep you in mind. So stay in touch. So I think I sent him I was like, wow, that's cool. So I sent him a postcard. I was living in New York at the time. He was in LA. And never heard from him again. 2 years went by. And then one night, 1986, it was like maybe February, chilly in New York, in Manhattan, phone rings. There was actually a phone back then. And I said hello, and I could hear like a sizzle, which, back then indicated it was a long distance call. I was like, hello. Goes, oh yeah, it's like it's a little modern, and he goes, and it's his voice saying, yeah, my name is Kit Carson, and I knew who he was because I read the gossip columns, and he'd been married to Karen Black, very glamorous, and I said, what's up? And he goes, I just want to know where to send a copy of the script for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and I was like, well. What I really wanted to say was, who is this really? Don't punk me, man. It wasn't a good time anyway. But I gave my address because that sizzle said it was long distance at least. So if they're punking you, at least it's exotic. Yeah, exactly. And a couple days later, the script arrived, and I read it, and I was told to look at the part of Chop Top, and checked it out, and I was like, wow, this is fucking cool, man. This is hilarious, and it's like a big part, and I'm part of the chainsaw, you know. And I called Kit back, and I said, man, this is hilarious. This is great. And he goes, oh, good. I'm glad you like it. And I said, oh, my God. He said, well, we'll be in touch. And I'm just thinking, what is going on here? And then I got a call from the Canon Films legal department. Somebody saying, you know, hello, Mr. Moseley, do you have an agent, or do you want to negotiate your own contract? I was like, and I said some great words, which I really recommend everybody, you know, say when there's a moment like that. It was, can I get back to you? And so, yes. So I got the number, you know, and I had met an agent from William Morris at a Christmas party like a month or two earlier. So I called her up at William Morris and said, would you negotiate a contract for me? And she said, sure, free money. And so gave her the number of Canon Films Legal. I guess she called up, and then she called me back, the agent, and she said, well, I've got some good news and some bad news. And I said, yeah, what's the good news? And she said, well, the good news is, apparently they want you to play this character called Chop Top in this movie, this Texas Chainsaw movie. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I said, well, what's the bad news? And she said, well, the bad news, they're only going to pay you like minimum, you know, SAG minimum. And I said, oh, geez. And I was, at the time, I was a freelance writer in New York City. And I was probably averaging maybe $300 a week in terms of earnings. Fortunately, I had a cheap rent. And so, you know, $300 a week. And I said, well, minimum wage, I mean, how much is that? She said, oh, God, I think it's like $1,700 a week. I was like, wow, that's bad news. That's fucking awesome. And she said, yeah, but there's more. And I said, yeah, what's that? She said, well, you know, you're going to have prosthetics. There's like a plate for the side of your head and everything. So they want you to shave your head. And I went, oh, okay. And she said, so I told them that you were a working actor, which wasn't really true, and that you know, this was going to, you know, interrupt your career. So they've agreed to pay you $5,000 to shave your head. I'm like, oh my God! I was like, that's bad news. And so that's how I you know, part of Chop Top. A long-winded story.
So, lesson is, I'll get back to you.
Yes, I'll get back to you. Take that pause.
Yes.
And also,
imagine what would happen if you negotiated your own contract. You're like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Yes. Don't negotiate your own contract.
Talk to someone who knows.
Let me get back to you, because I still do that. You know, I have a manager in Los Angeles, and I'm always, you know, and it's, you know, really, because I think a lot of actors have, you know, some lack of self-esteem. So somebody, they like me, you know, it's like Sally Fields going, you love me, you really like me, or whatever she said. You know, I mean,
and if I make them wait, they're going to find someone else. I think that's another
there's that too.
fear.
Yeah. But you know, hey.
So I'll do, Summer, if it's okay, a comment and then a question.
Yes.
So comment, this is the third state in which I've seen Bill. So I just want to thank Bill. For those of you in the audience who have not been to a convention with Bill, he makes himself very accessible. I see you pretty much in every state imaginable. So thanks for coming to Texas.
Yes, I'm sober today. That's the state.
When I saw him in Girard, Ohio, I was like, how is this guy sober in here? I don't understand. Anyway, on to my question. So you mentioned working sometimes 19, 20-hour days, which as somebody that works a desk job for 8 hours a day and is exhausted, I don't know how you do it. But to that end, what would you say is the most grueling film experience you had? And if you want to get to a more granular level, the most grueling scene that you've ever filmed?
You know, I've had a lot of them, but the most grueling it was pretty recently. It was a couple years ago. I did a short film, like a 25-minute film called Gingerbread, and I don't think it was ever released. But I was playing Abraham Lincoln, and Abraham Lincoln in a seance during the war in the White House. There was, I guess, a lot of spiritualism, especially Mary Todd Lincoln was big into, mediums and contacting the spirits. And so I was working, Mary Todd Lincoln, and this was played by Amanda Plummer. And so we were working, and the writer-director was very, very smart. Kendall Courtney Klein is her name. And but she had written this amazing monologue for Lincoln, and but it was done in the language of the time. And what I'm very good at is improvising, so that if I have trouble with a line, or I generally get the gist across. Sometimes not word for word, which is why I don't really work in TV that much, because they really like you to put the and, comma after the and all that stuff. But anyway, so there was no room for improvising because the language was so intricate and so important and fit together. And I just remember, just sweating through that particular scene, my particular monologue, to the point where, I finally nailed it. And I remember, I got it. We knew it was in the movie. We knew it was good. And I remember Amanda just being so relieved and happy. It was like, yes! She was like agonizing with me. So that was, that's the most recent, agony I've experienced. But I saw the movie, and it was actually, I'm only sorry that, it's so funny. It just reminds me that, there are 3 stages to movie making. Of course, there's writing it and getting it financed and, casting it and all the pre-production. Then, of course, there's the production itself, where you're acting and, scenes changing and locations and all that other stuff. And then there's post-production. And that's where, you think if you do a good job during production, you just imagine, you see this movie, you see it in your mind's eye, you just think this is going to be fantastic. And then you see it afterwards, and in post-production, they can ruin a movie. You can really ruin it. A lot of times that's a collaboration between maybe the director and producers, or, they're thinking what the audience wants or what the, distribution company wants. Somehow, you can screw it up. You can screw up the soundtrack, you can screw up which takes of which scenes, you can screw up the scenes themselves, because you can tell a completely different story by snipping and pasting. Anyway. I'm not going to cast aspersions specifically, but that was grueling. That was a grueling scene.
I think post is where the magic really happens.
It can.
Because it's just
That's
a bunch of pieces,
yeah.
and it has to get put together.
Well, that's why I love Devil's Reject so much. I am so proud of that. I'm so proud of Rob for being so diligent and so artful in post-production. Because I think the movie cuts together beautifully. Just everything about the Devil's Rejects, to me, I'm so proud of that. Just because I'm proud to be a part of it. And it's just amazing to me. That's why I love Rob. I mean, I love, obviously, House and 3 from Hell afterwards. But I just think Devil's Rejects is really, like, for me, it's like, I would call that my legacy film. If there were something, if you had to pick something from your oeuvre, nice French word there, that's what I would pick. With Chainsaw 2 a close second. I don't want to piss off Chop Tops.
I agree. And would you say that Devil's Rejects version of Otis might be your favorite? Or do you have one that you're particularly partial to?
It's funny.
I know it's all you. But...
Well, it was, when I did House of a Thousand Corpses, I never really got Otis. I remember there was a moment where I'm about to go and pull the trigger on the poor kneeling cop, Walton Goggins. And I remember coming out from behind, some old abandoned washer dryer in our front yard. And I come out and I go, get on your knees, piggy, or something like that. And you know, that it worked out okay. I hit my mark, and then you know, we cut, and it was, you know, we're gonna do another take, and Rob says, maybe this time, maybe scratch your belly. So I've got my gun in one hand, and I walk out, and as I walk out, you know, to Walton, you know, I'm sitting there like scratching my belly and telling him to get on his knees or whatever it is. And it was wonderful direction. That's one of my favorite moments of, you know, directing, because it wasn't like, you know, maybe try it this way, or, you know, just scratch your belly. And that was wonderful. That Otis I didn't really get until I was about maybe 3 weeks after we had finished shooting. And I had done it, I had done a good job as Otis. But it, you know, it wasn't just a connection with the spirit of Otis. And about maybe more than a month, maybe, after we had finished shooting, Rob wanted to add a little extra because we were maybe low on minutes or something. And so we went over to Wayne Toth, his special effects makeup guy, and we went to his studio, and we did the Run Rabbit Run scene. And it's where Otis is basically just addressing the camera. It's black and white. He's like, hunting humans ain't nothing but nothing. They all run like scared little rabbits. Run, rabbit, run, run, rabbit. And it was then that I connected with Otis. And it was very funny because when I did Devil's Rejects, I didn't have to really do a lot of, you know, recollection. I just remember that moment, that Run Rabbit Run moment, and that completely got me into Otis. So I think of House of a Thousand Corpses as kind of going to the dealer to buy a car, you know, kicking the tires, looking under the hood, checking it out. And then I think of Devil's Rejects as, you know, you bought the car and now you take it out on the fucking highway and put the pedal to the metal. So.
And Three from Hell.
That was cool. I mean, you know.
What version of the car is that, going back to the junk shop?
No, it's actually, no, it's in the garage. You're doing nice. Maybe try you know.
It's now restored?
Yeah, no, I think you try a high test instead of regular gas. I don't know, do something to it. Maybe some new tires, maybe a new paint job. I did not know, you know, I was also nervous about that. And I remember the first day we were shooting, I was in the back of a police van, and I come out shackled, and I address there's some reporters, you know, obviously we're like star criminals or something, and I'm not, you know, and I address the reporters, and I have some little monologue. I'm not even sure if it made it into the movie. But I started to, you know, speak to the assembled reporters, and I flubbed a line. And so Rob said, cut, yeah, let's try it again. So it's like, okay. And so take two, action. And so I'm regaling the reporters, and then I flub another line. It's like, cut, and Rob's looking at me like, Bill. And I said, give me a second here. And I sat down inside the police van, just, you know, by myself. And I heard this voice in my head that said, hey, Bill, get out of the way, I got this. And it was Otis. And, you know, Bill meaning like, hey, self-conscious actor who can't remember his lines and which side of my face is better and all that, you know, Hollywood bullshit. Like, shut up, get out of the way, I got this. And I did, I just got out of the way. And, you know, take three, kicked ass, and just, you know, that kind of propelled me through the rest of the movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was it like working with Rob as for the 3 movies? What was it like working with him?
It's great. It's wonderful.
Did you see like an evolution in his style with his experience?
I think he's probably cooler because he's done a bunch of movies, so he kind of knows the drill. We all do. We all get along really well. Yeah, I just found him, I find him very cool because we have a very similar sensibility. Like, you know, I like the Three Stooges. I like, he used actually a snippet of one of my favorite Three Stooges episodes in Three from Hell. he also used a snippet of one of my favorite movies called The Brain That Wouldn't Die, you know, Jan in the Pan, you know, like the head in the tray, like early 60s, black and white, you know, so he used, you know, so we have the same kind of, you know, aesthetic, I guess, in a way. You know, I think he's really cool. He also, it's always good to work with a director who writes his own scripts, because then he's not translating someone else's vision into his own. He already sees it in his head. He knows what he wants. He knows what it should look like. He's a very visual guy. So, you know, that makes it a lot easier. So we just know. And, you know, when you work with somebody for a bunch of times, you know, you've got a kind of a shorthand, so you don't really have to explain a bunch of stuff. You just kind of, yep, okay, yep, got it, and just go for it. So, yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Now, it's time for some homework. You have done about 1.5 million things out there. What is something that maybe someone might not be aware of, like myself, that maybe you want people to watch? Give us some homework. Next time I'll watch it, I'll come back to you.
There's a couple of, you know, strange, you know, movies. One I would say is Dead Air with Patricia Tallman, and directed by Corbin Burnson of LA Law. Yes, the dentist.
The scary dentist.
So I would say that, yes. Another one is with my old buddy Kane Hodder, and that's called Old 37. So if you check that out, that's pretty cool. And then another one I did in Canada, it's this very strange little movie called Exit Humanity. I'd check that out too. Kind of cool. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Give it up.
All right.